Welcome, and thank you for viewing this Garden State CLE video. All Garden State CLE video programs can be seen for free 24 hours a day. Besides viewing the show, you can also earn CLE credits. In order to receive CLE credits for this program, you will have to do the following. First, download an evaluation form from the website. Just click on step number 3, and the form will appear on your screen. Please print out a copy. Next, as you watch the program, you will note that from time to time, a keyword will appear on the screen in red lettering. Write these words down on your evaluation form. Accurately recording these words is a required step in granting you CLE credits. Finally, at the conclusion of the show, simply complete the evaluation form and fax or mail it to Garden State CLE. Remember, viewing the CLE program is absolutely free. The only time you ever pay is when you want to receive CLE credits. You can pay for your CLE credits online or by sending in a check with your evaluation form. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the following Garden State CLE video from the comfort of your own home or office.
Garden State CLE. 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 Garden State CLE.
Worthy of trust and confidence. What's this all about?
It's a novel, so everything in the book is fiction. Wink, wink.
All right.
It takes place, the story begins in the summer of 1963.
Okay.
And it ends on the morning of November 21st, 1963, on the streets of Newark.
All right. Well, we're going to come back to this in a second.
Okay.
I want, just so our viewers understand, because we're going to need to talk about the Secret Service and the law related to the Secret Service and the types of investigations they get involved in and all that. And I want to start off with your role. Graduated from college in 1971. And then right into the Secret Service, or did you do something legitimate first?
No, I really went right into the Secret Service. I was in a situation where I graduated from college in 1971, and what had happened is that we know that Jack Kennedy was killed, President Kennedy was killed in '63, his brother unfortunately was killed in 1968, and the only person standing next to Bobby Kennedy in '68 was Rosie Greer. He had no security of mention of any kind, which is really pretty shocking after what happened to his brother.
I just want to stop you for a second because our viewers may not be aware that the way things work now, this really was the impetus for providing not only Secret Service protection, because you should understand Secret Service is really kind of a small agency, especially compared to the FBI, but they will utilize other Treasury law enforcement personnel in campaign season when you have 15 or 20 different candidates for president, all of them getting Secret Service protection now, and I take it coming from that very unhappy incident.
Well, that's exactly what happened. That's how I wound up in the Secret Service and guys like me. After Bobby Kennedy was killed and they didn't have any protection for the presidential candidates, they decided that they would try to upgrade the entire Secret Service, so they decided that for this coming campaign, the 72 campaign, they would hire some young fellas to join the Secret Service and use them to bolster the Secret Service manpower and use them in the 72 campaign to protect the candidates.
Got it.
So they went directly to colleges, which was really the first time that they went right to colleges to hire young men out of college to join the Secret Service without any real police experience. And it was a real interesting experiment because prior to that, almost all Secret Service agents had either military experience, military police experience, or police experience. And then they would go to college, they would get their degree, they would have this police experience, and then they would move into the special agent's position.
Got it.
This time, they hired about 25 or 30 of us directly out of college.
Where were you going to school at this point?
I went to Loyola in Baltimore.
Okay.
Nice Jesuit college.
Yeah.
And they hired about 25 or 30 of us right out of college with no police experience at all.
Well, what made this enticing for you or intriguing for you? Why did you decide to do it? You could have gone to law school right away.
Yeah, or I could have gone to Vietnam too.
Right.
At that point, they made my job vital to the security of the nation. I did not have to go into the military. It was a choice. But I felt that this was more important. It was a great opportunity. It was incredibly exciting. The training was fabulous.
Talk about the training. Where did they train you?
Well, at that time, they trained us in Washington, D.C., and then they sent us to a special training academy they had in Beltsville, Maryland. So we spent 18 weeks in an academy in Washington, where we did, a lot of the legal training, and then we went to Beltsville, Maryland, where we did the physical training.
What do you mean by legal training?
We did the statutory training. We learned about the law enforcement training. We did a lot of the search and seizure procedures, a lot of the background that you needed to know as a law enforcement until it's what they call an 1811 series agent, that you had arrest powers that were given to you by Congress.
Got it.
And then the second part was the firearms training. We shot so many rounds. We shot every day, all day. We're probably more than any other agency in the government. While, for example, the FBI would qualify with their weapons once a year. They would literally go to the range once a year and qualify with their weapons. Secret Service agents would qualify with their weapons every month.
Wow.
So they would make us go out and we would shoot with the handguns, we would shoot with the shotguns, we would shoot with the Uzi. We were the only ones that had the 9mm Israeli-made Uzi.
Now, that era, was that because it was so small and easy to conceal and carry?
Yeah, the Uzi was so small. It was about the size of a Wonder loaf of bread.
Right.
And we would carry it in a briefcase that had a breakaway magnetically held lid, and you would just press a button and the lid would fall away, and the gun was held in the briefcase by a magnet, so you could just grab it and throw away the briefcase and it was ready to go.
I want to ask you a couple of questions, some specifics about your training. I want to talk about counterfeiting for a couple of seconds. Could you just talk historically about the role of the Secret Service in investigating and apprehending people who are involved in counterfeiting?
Well, in those days, there were real deal counterfeiters. Before for example, the $100 bill, before the United States currency was dramatically changed as it is today, compared to other currencies around the world, it was easy to counterfeit. It didn't really have multicolors. It really didn't have the protections that we have today. I don't know if you've seen the new $100 bill.
Well, I hold it up to a light, but I don't know what I'm looking for.
It's much more difficult to counterfeit. But the old $100 bills were really fairly easy, and counterfeiters would use an offset photo process, and we talk about it in the book a great deal.
They weren't using plates, but they were actually using photography in that era?
They would take a $100 bill and they would tack it up on a wall, and they would use a large format camera, something like a Hasselblad 2¼ by 2¼ inch square. And they would take a photograph, and they would take that negative, and they would use a light-sensitive metal plate, and they would burn onto that metal plate an image of the basic bill, and they would use that as a plate to make the
how would they get
counterfeit.
typically in that era? How would they get the cloth content and all that of the money right, so it felt right?
Well, they would buy. There was a commercially made paper made by the Hammer Mill Company. It was called Hammer Mill Bond, Gold Bond, and it was fairly close. And so they would do the basic black part of the bill, the back of the bill, in black, and then they would do the front, and then they would do the seals in a separate run, because the seals and the serial numbers were in as green, so they would do that in a separate run.
Do they do separate serial numbers generally, or do they keep the serial?
Nah, they would. If some of them were more enterprising, they would maybe run 4 or 5 different runs with separate serial numbers, but a lot of them were the same serial number. Who looks at the serial number, you know?
Did you find in that era that these investigations were international in scope? In other words, that was going on in the Far East or in the Philippines or in South America or something like that? Or was this primarily a domestic law enforcement problem?
They were regional, generally. You found that American counterfeiters would, organized crime, they would counterfeit the notes, and they would stay regional. They would stay in the United States. So we never really found any huge counterfeiting rings that would counterfeit American currency and then export them around the world. The only time that really happened or attempted was during the Second World War with the Nazis. And there was a great movie out called The Counterfeiters that won the International Film Festival Award, and I think it was in 2010, actually got the Academy Award, and it was called The Counterfeiters.
They should have gotten it for Best English Pound, is what they did for.
They actually, that's where they started, the Nazis successfully counterfeited the English pound such that the Bank of England couldn't even determine that they were counterfeit.
Now that's some talented guys.
Yeah, no, they were, and they were done in a concentration camp, and then they turned to the American dollar, and they would have been successful, except that it was too late in the war, and they needed to divert their attention to other matters.
Now, why the United States Secret Service? Why would the Secret Service be involved in be given the responsibility by Congress to investigate this particular crime?
It's a historical issue. 1865, they were the first federal law enforcement agency that was it was designated by the Congress of the United States. They investigated counterfeiting long before they were designated the responsibility of protecting the president. That's what they originally did.
Well, you would think after Garfield, McKinley, and Lincoln, they would get the idea that they probably needed somebody. When did the Secret Service actually get into the protection business?
After McKinley.
Okay, so we're talking about 1901, something like that? And again, this was a determination made by Congress?
Yes.
Is there any particular reason why they picked the Secret Service? It was really kind of involved in something completely unrelated.
Before that, it was the Pinkertons. I mean, it was really, they were the only ones that, like I said, you know, we didn't have the FBI till the 30s. There was nobody else. They were the ones.
So when you were getting your training in the 1970s, did part of your initial training involve counterfeiting, detecting counterfeit money, conducting those investigations?
Yeah.
And
actually, when you go through training, you actually produce. You learn how to make counterfeit currencies, and it's funny because part of the story of the book is an undercover counterfeiting case in which the main character goes undercover and participates in a counterfeiting operation in which he actually prints counterfeit $100 bills.
Well, that's completely unbelievable. Nobody would ever do that in New Jersey.
Yeah, no, of course not.
Now, what about protection? Did you get training in protection in your initial training?
Yeah, we did a lot of protection and training. We had a Hogan's Alley, which was like a street that was built, where we would have a principal that we would be guarding, and then instructors would attempt assassinations
Right.
and we would react.
Now, you're there in an era where you're just under a decade since the president had been murdered. And to what extent did that still reverberate in your training as you know, as a just a sensitivity in the Secret Service?
Well,
Was that still palpable in that era?
Sure. A lot of the guys, one of the director of the Secret Service, Rowley, James J. Rowley, when I was in the Secret Service, had been at the Kennedy assassination. Mm-hmm. When I was in training, when I was going through training, George Wallace had been shot.
Right.
So it was always on our mind. It was a very, very real. As a matter of fact, and during the time that I had been in the Secret Service, I had spent a summer with George Wallace while he was in a wheelchair. I spent an entire summer with Henry Kissinger in the Middle East.
Yeah, didn't you try to shoot him with a machine gun or something?
That's an incident we don't like to talk about.
All right. Well, that'll be for your next book. Now I've intrigued the audience. Can you tell them the story?
What story? This story?
No, the story when 30,000 feet when a machine gun goes off.
There's a rumor that
It's just a rumor.
There's a rumor that there was an Uzi that was in an overhead compartment on Air Force One, because Henry Kissinger flew in one of the Air Force Ones coming back from the Middle East.
Right.
And the lemon squeeze had been taped. And the lemon squeeze is a safety on the gun, and there's a rumor, unconfirmed, that in some turbulence, the gun, the Uzi in the case, had fallen out of the overhead compartment and had gone off.
Well, that's obviously a pack of lies. That could never happen.
Totally unconfirmed, and a pack of lies.
Nobody killed, though, right?
No one had been injured.
Okay, well, that's very fortunate. And the pressure, the cabin remained pressurized, and everybody was fine.
Yeah, it's just
a total no harm, no foul, if it's true.
Hollywood rumor.
That's right. That's what I heard. As part of your training, did you actually get into the popular culture? The Secret Service agents are supposed to throw their bodies in front of the target to save them and all that. I mean, is that true, or is that just kind of the stuff of Hollywood?
I don't know if you've ever seen the film when President Reagan was shot. Mm-hmm. Everybody's seen it, but if you notice, everybody around is, when they hear the gunshots, everyone in the crowd is diving for cover. But the Secret Service agents are standing up straight.
Right.
The one agent, Tim McCarthy, who was
did you know him, by the way?
I knew him very well.
Mm-hmm.
We went through training together.
Oh, okay.
And if you notice, he was standing up straight and his arms out were like this, and he got shot in the chest.
Yep.
And that wasn't by accident, because Secret Service agents are trained as what police officers are trained when they get in a combat situation, that they bend their knees, they get down into a low combat. That's the theory. You get down in a low combat position so that your chest, your rib cage is bent forward so that a round could bounce off your rib cage. You put your left hand over your groin so that if you get shot, it'll hit your hand first rather than your groin, and you fire in that position. Secret Service agents are not taught to fire in that position. Secret Service agents.
But how do they get that into your muscle memory to do that?
Because that's why you fire thousands of rounds every week. You stand straight up. You stand up straight, with both arms outstretched, both hands on the gun.
But it's so unnatural, though, when you hear gunfire immediately.
It is. That initially,
they're training you to do something which is completely it goes against human psyche.
It does. But after you do it, after you're trained, and after you do it thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and you understand what your mission is. Tim McCarthy was proof of the success of the training.
Well, did he have any type of body armor on?
He probably, I don't know for sure, but I know that at that time we were all issued Velcro bulletproof vests.
So I know he was very, very badly hurt and spent a lot of time recuperating.
Yeah. But thank God he was fully recovered.
The problem with all this, of course, is with modern weaponry, and you'd really have to have a tremendous amount of body armor on if somebody came at you with because just given the power of modern day ballistics. I'm just wondering whether or not you'd be better off concentrating on getting your target out of there quickly as possible, just boom, go, as opposed to trying to shoot it out and protect it with your bodies.
Well, that's the way it's set up now. They have what they call CAT, the counterattack teams. So different Secret Service agents have different responsibilities. It's all the protection is set up in concentric circles. Those who are closest to the president, for example, their obligation is not to get into a fight. And you saw that with, for example, even with President Reagan, their first obligation was to get him into the car, which is bulletproof. Get him into the car where he's safe and get out of there. And then the counterattack team takes care of apprehending.
So everybody has, each team has a different, a specific job to do.
That's right.
And of course, if one of the vehicles is mobilized for something, you want to be able to get them into a backup vehicle as quickly as possible, I would imagine.
That's right.
Who was the president during your active duty?
When I started, Nixon was president, and then Ford, and then I left before Jimmy Carter was elected.
Now, my recollection is there were at least 2 assassination attempts on President Ford. There might have been 3. The one I recall specifically is the Squeaky Fromm attempt, but I think there was another one also. Were you involved in any of those?
No.
No? Did they reverberate, though, through the training?
Sure, yeah. But like I said, I spent 3 months with Kissinger in the Middle East.
Right.
And, we were always under attack. I mean, we were always under attack in the Middle East. We were in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv.
Well, I want to talk about this because it seems to me that so much of what you do has got to be unbelievably boring, in the sense that if you have someone you're going to be protecting who's going to go overseas, you've got to go out there ahead of time. You got to get the cars there. You got to sweep everything. You've got to go through every place where he's going to be and look for bombs and nowadays IEDs and places where you could have a sniper hidden away. And it sounds to me like it's just a tremendous amount of detailed grunt work. And by saying detail, I mean you got to really pay attention to detail to do this job properly. Am I, overstating the case here?
No. But you have to remember that, unlike the FBI, the Secret Service is a very small organization. Right. So we don't do all of that work individually. We rely on, for example, the EOD, the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Teams, are generally provided by the military.
Got it.
So, you don't find Secret Service agents out, looking for bombs. We don't have that expertise. We supervise the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Teams that are provided by the military.
Got it. But you do go around looking for sniper areas and things like that, and kind of supervise. I guess you would use either local assets or, if it's the United States, local police to do security, right?
We try not to do a lot of that. We try not to rely on, because we really don't know who these people are.
Right.
We try to rely on our own people, or we try to rely on the FBI, or Customs, or some of the Homeland Security people that are federally.
Now, just as a matter of law, how do you go in and out of these countries with all kinds of weaponry? You've got Uzis and sidearms and things like that. How do you wind up doing that?
If they want the President of the United States to come to their country,
right,
the United States Secret Service goes with him where he goes. And if they don't like it...
But I mean, just as a matter of law, just to keep things nice and legal, you have diplomatic passports? And,
yes, we have diplomatic passports.
Right, so your luggage is not going to be subject to search if you have a diplomatic passport?
No.
All right.
No. Now, when we travel in an entourage with the President. We travel either on Air Force One,
right,
and we have a follow-up plane that flies with Air Force One. It's the car plane, which is wherever he goes, we bring his own car.
So that's a C-130, I guess. Did you ever have to fly on that thing?
I have.
Why were you being punished?
They're not a lot of fun.
But you know what? You've got to think about it. That is really important, because who's to say that some foreign government wouldn't go in there and put a bug in the car and listen to everything the president had to say?
That's precisely the reason why, like even with Secretary Kissinger, we would bring one of the presidential limousines wherever he went, and that's exactly right. If he wanted to talk, that's the only place we knew that he could go,
right,
and have a private conversation, because we kept security on the limos from the time they arrived.
Sure.
Never left them out of our sight.
I mean, I would leave them right inside the aircraft. It's probably the safest place for them. Did Kissinger, by the way, ever talk about anything besides soccer? No, just joking. You don't have to answer that question.
Yes.
Did you get to know him at all?
Not in a real personal sense, but you did get to see other sides of him other than what the public saw.
Got
He's
it.
a fun-loving guy.
Now, what type of a shift would you work when you were on the road, so to speak? At least a normal 8-hour shift?
No, generally 12.
Okay.
When we're on the road, generally 12.
And this is something I ask you about it now because the statute of limitations has run out for you. There's no doubt about
I'm
that.
not going to answer any of these questions.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not going to try to embarrass you, but just so the incident in Cartagena, which really kind of exposed a very, very seedy side to some unprofessional behavior by some of the agents.
Yes,
And
very unprofessional.
well, unprofessional, and I think the public expects a lot more from the Secret Service than they were getting from these particular agents. But I mean, my question is, when you're off duty, what are your responsibilities when you're there?
Well, first of all, you're never off duty. You may not be working on a shift, okay? You have time to eat and sleep and rest and relax, but you're never off duty, especially when you're in a foreign country. And your responsibilities to those concentric circles of security, you're certainly never off duty. So, for example, from what I know about what happened is that these agents brought unauthorized individuals within those concentric circles, okay? So they allegedly brought prostitutes into the hotel where, you know, you had principals staying. That's certainly a very serious breach of security.
I'd be concerned if you're off duty, though, that you could be approached by anybody, you know, looking to turn you, bribe you, you know, in some way compromise you. It's just when you're overseas. I mean, do they train you to be careful about this stuff?
Of course, you know, and you know, the agents that were involved in that, you know, they weren't new agents. You know, it's like not like they didn't know. I don't know what they were thinking. It was just very poor judgment.
I want to just kind of for 1 second drop.
And I'm sure, by the way, that it was an anomaly. I'm sure that it was, you know, not typical behavior for agents in the Secret Service either now or back then.
Well, I want to talk about it. Just go back to 1963 for a second, because I've always felt that that there might have been an issue with the Secret Service agents who were responsible for Kennedy, that they were not particularly well rested, that they'd been working too long, too many hours. Was that in play at all, or is it just kind of a rumor?
Well, yeah, you know, you hear that. You hear that it's a rumor. But, you know, I understand that the agents were there the night before.
Right.
But, you know, the agents that were with the president in the follow-up car, for example, Clint Hill, he was the agent that jumped on the follow-up car.
Very famous in the Zapruder films.
Yeah, right. All those agents that were on that follow-up car arrived with the president that morning. So they all got up early that morning, and they all slept in their beds at home that night. They all arrived with him at Love Field in Dallas that morning, and so they were, you know, they all arrived that morning.
Where he had to be coming from the day before? He was still in Texas the day before, was he not?
Oh yeah, you know what? They're right. They didn't come from Washington. You're right. They did. They were someplace else in Texas the night before.
So they've been someplace far away and then flew to Dallas.
That's right. They flew to Dallas.
There was nothing where they had been working an extended shift or any of that.
Not that I'm aware of. But you know, everybody works long hours. That's part of the job. You know, sometimes it's difficult. You know, I know that one of the things I needed to do. I had never flown in an airplane until I became a Secret Service agent. I just never had. But one of the things I needed to learn was how to sleep.
Sitting up.
Yeah, I had to learn how to sleep, because you would work a 12-hour shift, and then when you were done with your shift, you would have to go to the airport and get on an airplane and use your 12 hours to travel to where you were going for the next movement.
Right.
So that included your sleep time. So then you would have to get some sleep.
Which is like sleeping on a C-130. That's what I want to know.
No, doesn't happen. You just shake, rattle, and roll. And it's very cold in those airplanes.
Well, you know, they expect the best. I mean, you're riding with cars, you know.
Right.
So you had to be part of an advance team, I would imagine, fairly frequently.
Yeah.
Where else did you go besides the Middle East?
I traveled all over the United States, went all over Western Europe. I remember with some other principals. We went to France.
Did you go to Paris a lot with Kissinger?
Yeah, I went to Paris, went to Germany, Italy, all over Western Europe. Went to Greece. Spent some time with the Kennedy family.
This is like the Aristotle analysis type era.
Yeah.
And when you went to, was this during the era when Kissinger was conducting the Paris peace conferences?
Actually, it was when he. We spent most of the time when he was conducting the negotiations for peace in the Sinai.
Right. Did you work with the host governments for providing security? Do they cooperate with you?
Oh, they always did. Yeah, they didn't want any. They didn't want any incidents.
Right.
You know, they didn't want any incidents.
And how about when they come to the United States? You know, will they coordinate with the Secret Service in terms of providing protection for their own people?
Yeah, it was funny because some governments were more difficult than the others. You know, when the Israelis always came, they insisted on taking a very high profile with their protectees when they came to the United States, and we understood that because they had the most exposure. Whenever we went anywhere, we took the lead on when the president went anywhere. You know, other governments were just as happy to say to the Secret Service, "Okay, he's the president of the United States. You're in charge. Whatever you want, we'll give you whatever you want."
Correct.
When other protectees came to the United States, other governments were just as happy to say to the United States, "You're in charge in the United States." So
Got it.
they were just happy to give us the responsibility.
And I guess statutorily now, the president can also designate individuals to be protected by the Secret Service.
Yes,
Right.
like the Pope, for example.
Right.
When the Pope comes to the United States, the Secret Service protects the Pope. It's not a foreign head of government or not a foreign head of state. It doesn't actually fit within the statute.
Right.
But whenever he comes, the Secret Service
I think this is one of the many changes that came out of the Kennedy assassination because what's really funny, I don't know that the American public really understands this to this point, that killing the President of the United States at that time was not a federal offense.
It was not.
They would have had to try this guy in Dallas.
That's exactly right. And the FBI had no jurisdiction.
Yeah, I guess the only way the FBI could get jurisdiction at all would be by order of the president, right? Because it wasn't there had been no federal crime.
I don't know how the president could have even ordered jurisdiction.
I think in those days, I could be wrong, but I think the statute in those days said that the FBI had jurisdiction to investigate certain statutory crimes designated by Congress or at the direction of the President of the United States.
That could have been.
So that's probably the justification the FBI had to conduct the investigation in the first place. But no one, after 3 prior assassinations, they still hadn't figured out that it should be a federal offense. You know, in fact, I'm not sure it was a federal offense to kill any federal elected official at that point, not a senator or congressman or anybody else.
I don't think it was.
But things have changed since 1963.
They certainly have.
Let me talk to you about Jake and all his activities as a Secret Service agent. I'm not talking about Jake the basketball player. I'm talking about Jake the hero, the protagonist. How did you go about undertaking this project, the research and everything?
I don't know. I had a story that I wanted to tell. It's really a good story. As you can see on the cover of the book, CBS New York picked it as the best summer beach read this summer.
We're going to get a tight close-up of that.
Okay, be sure you do. And it's gotten some great reviews if you go on Amazon. I started with the beginning. The story starts with a bunch of counterfeiters that are running counterfeit notes through the bill validators at the slots in Caesars. And Jake is a Secret Service agent who was out in California doing some research for the
You're
Secret
talking about the
Service.
Caesars in Las Vegas.
Caesars in Las Vegas, right. The Caesars in Las Vegas. And he was doing some hospital surveys in Los Angeles, and this new counterfeit note broke in Las Vegas, and he got sent out to help the Las Vegas field office. And so he's out there, and he's conducting a surveillance on this team of counterfeiters. And one of the counterfeiters happens to be this very attractive redhead who becomes known as the Testarossa. And he becomes highly infatuated with her and winds up chasing her around Las Vegas and through the rest of the book.
Yikes.
Yikes. Yeah.
But you're putting yourself, though, back many, many years ago. You're talking about 1963.
Right.
How did you go about researching all the stuff that was going on in those days? I mean, I know you have a mental image of the movement of the book, but knowing you, you were really a stickler for
I did.
verisimilitude and would want to investigate exactly what's happening.
Well, there was lots of music. They're driving around in cars. They're listening to music, and I just did the research. Actually, it all fell into place. The music that they were listening to, the cars that they were driving, the watches that they were wearing, the things that they were talking about.
Right.
It involves some organized crime guys. It involves a Cuban agent that Castro sneaks into the United States. It involves a plot on President Kennedy.
This is the next thing I wanted to ask you. As part of your research for the book, did you have to dive into the minutiae of the Kennedy assassination?
Yes, but that wasn't difficult because I've always had a theory about my own personal theory about the Kennedy assassination.
Tell me about it.
Well, I've always felt that countries and governments have always done many terrible things to the government and the people of the United States.
Well, how about the state of New Jersey doing stuff to the people who live here?
Yeah, that's true.
It's filed my tax return. That's why I bring that up. Let me move this down. Here we go.
Okay. Hirohito and the Japanese that bombed Pearl Harbor, Korea, Libya. They were just talking about Lockerbie, and the North Vietnamese and what they did to our prisoners. Now we send people to North Vietnam for vacation. When we ended the Second World War, we allowed the emperor to remain in Japan. There's examples of that throughout history. Even the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cubans didn't put the missiles in Cuba. The Russians put the missiles in Cuba. All right, they're the ones that put most of our country under the gun of, nuclear weapons. And it wasn't long after that we're hugging Khrushchev. So why? Why this hatred, for Castro? What is it that Castro did that all these years later we have still not made up with the Cuban government?
Let me answer your question with a question, okay? I think it's pretty well documented now. This came out of the Church Committee and, really was in play that there had been more than one attempt by our CIA to assassinate Castro.
Well, I talked about that in the book.
And they had all kinds of really elaborate ways they wanted to kill him. Some of them involving sex and poison.
Not even to kill him. Some of the attempts they did were just to embarrass him and emasculate him. And make him lose his hair, made him his teeth rot.
Maybe it's because there was so much. Our government put so much faith in him to replace the Batista regime. And then we came in, and all of a sudden now he's a communist, and gee, who wouldn't have spotted that? But I mean, that really kind of flew in the face of what the government had been led to believe. I don't know anything about this stuff, but I'm just wondering if the fact that we tried to utilize mafia resources to assassinate him through the CIA, this is some kind of payback. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I think a lot of that stuff that we did we attempted to do and we did to Castro happened before. Before the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Way before it, sure.
Way before. Okay. So then, the Cuban Missile Crisis arises, but why do we still hold this grudge? We're really punishing the Cuban people. They're really suffering there still as a result of this embargo. Right. My theory is that we're going to find out someday that Fidel Castro was personally involved in the assassination of John Kennedy.
So you think the fair play for Cuba that Oswald was involved with has something to do with that?
Absolutely.
Well, who couldn't figure that out?
It's like the magic bullet theory.
Right.
What's an Arlen Specter? So I truly believe that Castro was, and I think that no president will ever shake the hand of the Kennedy killer, and that's the reason why we are still holding a grudge against Fidel Castro, and someday our children might learn.
Well, look, think about the circumstantial evidence for a second, okay? I remember when this happened, and I remember it happened very, very well.
Yeah, so do I.
The first thing that people around me were bemoaning was the extreme right-wing politics of the people in Texas, and they thought it was some type of right-wing conspiracy to get rid of him. But if you look at the guy who was actually supposedly responsible, this guy's a communist, defected from the United States,
right.
Married a Russian,
right.
And was as wacky as they come, so to speak.
Right.
Had been involved in this fair play for Cuba
right.
Thing in New Orleans, and how hard is it to figure out what's going on here behind the scenes? What kind of smoking gun do they need? No pun intended. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I don't know. Do you think he really could have pulled off those 3 shots? Look, let's say he really could have. Okay, let's say he really could.
What, a $10 Carcano rifle?
It seems extremely unlikely to me. And then you've got this Jack Ruby thing.
Right.
Where is this coming from? But the thing that really surprises me and bothers me the most is that, when Bin Laden blew up the World Trade Center.
I'm going to wait till all the evidence is in on that.
Yeah, yeah, right. He told the whole world, and he was proud to say that he did it. Okay, and the same thing, with King, and all the other assassinations, and with Oswald, he was clearly anti-Kennedy. He clearly supported Castro. But when they arrested him, if he really was the one that killed Kennedy, why wasn't he standing up saying, "Yeah, I killed that SOB and he deserved to die"?
The only thing he said, "I'm a patsy," as I recall.
Yeah. He never said, "Yeah, I did it, and I'm glad I did it. I did it for Mother Russia. I did it for Cuba. He deserved to die, and I'm a hero of the revolution." Never did it.
Now, you and I have represented enough criminals to know that that's unusual behavior, given what they're accusing him of.
Never did it.
If there was a political component of it, something of that, politics, that's what they want.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of this.
Never happened.
Well, look, I don't know that we're ever going to know the answer. It's probably hidden.
We won't, but somebody will. Our children will know.
Yeah, it's hidden in the archives, and 75 years from now it'll come out. But this is all in play in your book to a certain extent?
It is. It's all in play in the book. It's all about this Miguel, a Cuban undercover that sneaks into the United States through Key West. And becomes involved in this counterfeiting conspiracy, and Jake unknowingly becomes involved with these organized crime figures, a bunch of really cool characters, and he becomes involved in this quandary because he works undercover with these guys out of Newark, and he starts to see a side of these men that is different than what he expected. That these men are not just criminals. They have a different side to them.
Is there an implication in your book that, or do you believe personally, that the assassination of President Kennedy could have been avoided or stopped in some way?
Absolutely.
Really? What do you think would have had to have happened to make that occur?
Somebody just needed to pay some attention to what was going on. Somebody just needed to take a look at where everybody was and what was going on, and the various law enforcement agencies needed to talk to each other. CIA, FBI, and Secret Service needed to share information, which they never did.
Well, especially in the Hoover era. I mean, that was just not going to happen.
Hoover's a character in the book.
Oh, is he?
Well, the director.
Okay. You don't give him a name. You might get in trouble.
You don't need to give him a name.
What was the experience like writing a book? I take this is your first book?
Yeah, it is my first book.
Now, would you agree with the statement that writing books is extremely hard work?
It's extremely hard work, and dealing with editors after you write the book is extremely painful. But it's really very, very satisfying. Most of this book was written in 20-minute intervals, believe it or not. The thoughts would come, and I would sit down, and I would go from point A to point B, and then I would put it down, and I would leave it alone and come back.
Now, were you dictating, or were you actually sitting down writing on a computer?
I did it the old-fashioned way.
Sitting down, typing? Yeah, I'm that way, too, because I just can't. It's just it's very slow, plotty, methodical way that I write, and I just have to. I just have to do it that way. That's the age that we're at. Although you are much older than I am.
Yeah, I know.
Do you find that there were certain times of the day, though, to be better for you to write or easier for you to write?
Well, sometimes I would leave my cell phone, my iPhone, next to the bed, and an idea would come, and I would get up and I would just stick it on my little notepad.
Right. Did you know where this was going
Yes.
at the beginning, or did it kind of evolve and take you off in different directions where Jake is doing X and you didn't think he was going to be doing X, but it sounds like it'd be an interesting way to go?
It's funny because I always had a beginning and I always had an ending.
Right.
So it's kind of like a GPS system. I knew where MapQuest. I knew where I started and I knew where I was going, but I didn't know how I was going to get there.
Right, so it was like a black box.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right.
But you know what? See, a lot of people kind of get hung up. That was one of the things that I had to accomplish when I started writing books, is that many times I would know the beginning, I would know the end, but I didn't know what the middle was going to be. But see, with word processing, it doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
You know, you can just write wherever you want, and then the word processing will put it all together.
Yeah.
It's not an analog exercise. You know, it's more of you can approach things randomly. You just have to make sure you don't leave anything out.
Yeah, no, and that's true, because if you're stuck here and you don't know where you're going with that, you can go over here and you can work on this a little bit, and then you can kind of put it together. I know it's 140,000 words.
Right.
It was longer than that. And so
But your editors made it cut it back?
Yeah, and actually it's better. It's shorter, is a little better. 140,000 words is a lot of words. So.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, right. I know yours. I mean, I've seen what you've written.
I've written. I think I have 10 books in print now, and I have to tell you, I can't write when I'm tired at all. The best time for me to write is either first thing in the morning, or after I've lain down and slept for a while, get up, from a nap. I can write then effectively, but apart from that, if I'm tired at all, I'm wasting my time. I just can't get my neurons firing. Can't do it. The level of concentration that's involved in this when you're writing, especially if you, like in your case, where you're writing dialogue, and you've got to visualize the stuff and get it down and get the accents right and the vocabulary right. It's just an enormous. It's stressful and requires a lot of heavy-duty thinking. You agree?
Thank God for spell check.
Some spell check can screw you up sometimes.
Yeah,
too.
they really can.
Now, quick question: how are you going to go about marketing this book? Where are you selling this?
It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle. It's on what's the Barnes and Noble, whatever that is. It's Sparks has it now, so it's being marketed through all the bookstores, and we're putting together a marketing plan. So I don't really know. That's all I know. I know I have a publicist who's putting together a plan.
What about the screenplay?
You know, that's interesting, because we've been approached by some people that they want to make a movie. And they said, we need a screenplay. And they're talking about, well, somebody could write a screenplay, or I could write a screenplay.
I'll tell you the perfect guy to write your screenplay.
You know who?
His name is Robert Ramsey.
Yeah, you want to write a screenplay?
Not me.
Now, who is he?
It's a guy named Robert Ramsey who writes screenplays for all these top Hollywood movies.
Really?
Another
guy?
No, of course not. But you can see him all over the place. If you look at him on Internet Movie Database, he's done 1 million movies. Oh yeah.
You know, I saw an interview of Mario Puzo once, before he died, obviously, and they asked him about the screenplay for The Godfather, and he said that they asked him about doing the screenplay, and he said that after he wrote The Godfather, he wrote the screenplay for Godfather 1 and wrote the screenplay for Godfather 2, and he had never written a screenplay before. And so when they asked him to write the screenplay for Godfather 3, he decided that, well, you know, maybe he should do some research and figure out how to write a screenplay. So he went out and bought a book that said how to write a screenplay. And he opened it up, and it said in chapter 1, it said, if you want to learn how to write the perfect screenplay, read the screenplay, The Godfather 1 and Godfather 2.
You know, I have the same experience all the time. I'll be looking up a legal issue, and I go on Westlaw, look it up, and the only stuff that's there is stuff that I wrote.
There you go.
I don't want to see that stuff. I want to see what other people have had to say. Very frustrating. Yeah. Well, you know, there's actually computer software out there now that'll help you
I know.
do that.
And I don't know whether I want to write the screenplay or I want to write the sequel. So I haven't decided what to do. Maybe I could do both.
You do you do the screenplay first, okay? Get yourself.
You think I should do the screenplay first?
Most definitely.
You know, I have a law practice. I have to pay the bills.
Yeah, I know, but you don't have
this stuff doesn't pay the bills.
You have no clients, so it doesn't matter.
I know. So.
You know, I think that we really should spend a few minutes talking about the legalities of all this. You know, in terms of protecting your intellectual property and copyright and trademark and all that. I mean, you given thought to people coming around and stealing your ideas and beating to the punch? What do you do to protect yourself on that kind of stuff?
Well, I've copyrighted it. I gave it. I hired a lawyer.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I hired a lawyer to copyright it, and I was also more concerned with the 701 getting prosecuted.
I want to hear about that. I want to talk about that a little bit, because that's it applies not only to the Secret Service but also applies to
it does. We actually, when we did this, there's actually a statute, 18 U.S.C. section 701 and 702. So we had to put this in the forward of the book. And it says that it suggests an interpretation of a historical episode that is shrouded in more mystery and is the subject of more debate than probably any other single event in the history of the United States. While I have alluded to some actual historical figures, their conduct is a product of my own alternative and hypothetical theories on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Any similarity to other persons living or dead or actual events is purely coincidental. The story or opinions expressed here are not approved, endorsed, or authorized by or associated in any manner with the United States Secret Service, the FBI, or any other government entity.
In fact, the whole thing happened in China. It didn't happen here.
Because there is actually a criminal statute that will authorize a felony prosecution by the United States.
But you got to think it's got to be aimed at people in the CIA. It's going to be aimed at people in the FBI, Secret Service, who are exposed to these, very, very sensitive secrets.
It's
but you still have First Amendment out there too,
Yeah, I know, but it's the same thing when we did the book. We put the image of, we used USSS, United States Secret Service, and we used a partial image of the badge.
Right.
And we were actually I discussed it with a very successful attorney in New York who was under the opinion that we were going to get a cease and desist letter from the Secret Service.
Why? That's not copyrighted.
The worthy of trust and confidence is on the United States Secret Service website. They claim it as their motto.
Well, that's a good reason to borrow it from yours. But again, they can't copyright this stuff.
That's what he said. He said because they are the government, but
right. Government can't copyright stuff.
And but we didn't get a letter.